Welcome, everyone, to Bitcoin Magazine's Meet the Taco Plebs. Before we get started today, as always, I must inform you that we're having the best event in the world, Bitcoin 2022, in Miami, April 6th through the 9th. You're going to be able to get 10% off with code TACOPLEBS, no space, just Taco Plebs. And if you do purchase a GA ticket with Bitcoin, you can get $100 off. And I believe it's $1,000 off for Whale Pass if you purchase with Bitcoin. So don't be afraid to spend those sats, friends. And I definitely want to see as many of you in Miami as possible. And if you're interested in our on-chain analysis product, the deep dive, I do have a code for you, macro21, no space as well. And you can get a nice discount on our on-chain analysis product created by Dylan. So without further ado, we have a fantastic guest today. Nick Ward, head of growth here at BTC Inc., has joined us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Casey. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I really feel like you were one of the most important additions to our team in the last 6 or so months, I'd say. And you've really made a huge splash in terms of like our reach, our marketing. So it's been great to have you on the team.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I've kind of been looking at working in Bitcoin for a long time, and Bitcoin Magazine was kind of like the top echelon of companies that you can work at as far as that goes. So definitely happy to be here and working with everybody.
Yeah, well, it's been a great fit so far. But first, I want to ask you how you got into Bitcoin. What led you to the orange rabbit hole?
Sure. So my first introduction or my first touch point with Bitcoin came in 2014. I was working on a web design project, and it was brought up in a group chat with myself and a couple other developers. I had been pretty big into fantasy sports and DFS, which is daily fantasy sports specifically, like DraftKings and FanDuel. I had recently won like a couple $1,000, and I was looking to like just take those gains and roll them into something more significant. And I still have like screenshots of that discussion between myself and those developers. And like looking back at it, it's pretty rough to look back at that discussion, because obviously with hindsight, I can see the enormous opportunity cost that came as a result of me not digging in when I first heard about it. So that was my first touch point. I wound up getting a little bit. I wound up getting out of it very shortly after and not doing the homework to understand what Bitcoin was. So I had sold a few months later. I came back in 2017 with a vengeance, fell for a lot of the same mistakes, a lot of altcoins, ICOs, crazy hype. But thank God the 2017 bubble popped, because I'm not sure I would have learned my lesson otherwise. Just having that multi-year bear market after 2017 kind of broke down. That bear market was, I looked at it kind of like as an incredible opportunity to just learn what I was just a part of, kind of like a post-mortem, like looking back. I think the key part for anyone that goes through like a bull and bear cycle and they find themselves in a bear cycle is like, you have to have the curiosity to want to dig in and ask those questions, and want to know the answers to the questions. Like, what did I just witness? What was I just a part of? Why did this happen? Has it happened before? And what's with all these crazy people saying Bitcoin is the only thing that matters? I think curiosity is kind of what fuels that entire process. So kind of thankful that I, had my first touch point, but in hindsight, I wish I would have dug a little deeper, if that makes sense.
Well, hindsight is certainly 2020. But I find your reflection on sort of like the most important part being recognizing like what you just went through in terms of like cycles and booms and busts, and figuring out why, as you said, people were sort of saying Bitcoin's the only thing that matters, regardless of boom or bust cycle. I found that really interesting. And your fantasy football, you wrote an article for us talking about anti-fragility in fantasy football. So that's an interesting sort of link to Bitcoin. And I feel like it could be a common one. I feel like many people might have experienced, their first Bitcoin interaction with online sort of DraftKings style stuff. But going forward, I guess what I would ask you is, what would you say the primary life lesson you've experienced in Bitcoin is?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of life lessons in Bitcoin, that's for sure. If I had to boil it down to one, it's kind of like one of the ethos phrases that surrounds the Bitcoin space is just don't trust, verify. Uh, Bitcoin has a way of like requiring you to investigate root causes of what's happening and why it's happening in the world. Uh, so really digging and understanding Bitcoin from first principles um, is the only way to actually understand it, in my opinion. It forces you to challenge assumptions. You have to seek out and verify information for yourself and come to the same conclusions. Uh, One of my favorite quotes that I came across actually pretty recently was from a biologist and a writer whose name was E.O. Wilson. And he said, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. So what it kind of feels like is happening in the world right now is that we've reached a critical point where our feeble little Paleolithic brains haven't evolved to process the sheer amount of information in the world around us. Like the internet's kind of changed us in a way that we don't understand yet, in my perspective. Just the sheer volume of information seems like we are bogged down with noise surrounding us everywhere, 24 hours a day, and we spend a lot of our lives just plugged into these like dopamine dripping machines, like our cell phones, cable TV, social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading something a few years back that breaks down the different habit forming loops that engineers try to build into these systems. Like they design them specifically, like going back to sports betting and gambling and stuff like that. A lot of these systems are specifically built with the intention to hijack our attention. And they do that by replicating addictive platforms. Like if you think about Instagram and Facebook used to scroll and it used to have an end of the feed. That's no longer, right? They replaced that feature with something like pull to refresh, very similar to when you pull the arm of a slot machine and you're hoping to see something that you like that, you know, gives you a little dopamine hit. So they really kind of take those things and use it as a way to hijack attention. So for me, discovering Bitcoin was kind of like a way to clear away a lot of that noise and a lot of that, a lot of those loops that you get into, and finding out what's true and like honing in on it. So just digging through like the incentive structures of different systems that govern our lives every day, and finding that a lot of them are corrupt or broken or have misaligned incentives in a way that's likely not repairable. So we kind of have to build from a new foundation.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting way to look at it. It certainly challenges. I mean, I never even thought of like incentive structures and attention loops like you're describing here until I really had Bitcoin, and it brought my attention to a bit more of like a long term thinking type thing. I don't know when that quote about the real problem of humanity. I don't know when that was spoken or written or what have you, but certainly we have approached godlike technology, and
Yeah.
and we're our human capacity for reason and understanding has been challenged by the vast amount of data and information to absorb out there, and I totally agree with that quote that we really have to catch up here with the way we organize our society, or our technology will end up ruling us instead of the other way around. So
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. That's a great way to put it for sure.
yeah, it's certainly something that as soon as the internet was invented, we really achieved a level of technology uncomprehendable by anyone who was alive at the time of its creation. That's for sure. And so it's curious to see how Bitcoin will affect our thinking on those sort of systems, and Bitcoin at least feels like a godlike technology. So we could only hope that our institutions are at least able to catch up somewhat. But moving forward, you've done some really cool things in the past. I'm not going to name them exactly, but I did stalk your LinkedIn, and I was
Oh
just
gosh.
curious. Well, I was just curious how your previous creative experience has contributed to the work you've done so far for us.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it feeds into a lot of things. Like, all my previous experiences kind of just compound and build on top of each other. We kind of use our time in different careers and different work and experiences that we have to just build out like a tool belt of skills that we can use to, build more complex or build more higher level projects, if you will. I'd say most of like to rewind all the way back, I went to college for digital media. That was my major. After that, I started working at a small agency startup in New York City. I was there for a couple of years. Went to another small agency, and working in like startups and small agencies was actually extremely beneficial, at least from my perspective now, looking back, because I had what amounted to like a front row seat of what those daily decisions and constant iteration processes are that are necessary for building something new. In addition to that, it was extremely beneficial to be part of an agency where my role was basically to take other businesses and help build out an online presence for them. So I had to do that over and over and over again, build out an online presence for businesses. That ranged from a lot of things. Like it ranged from starting out with graphic design, moving towards web design, moving towards website management, and then branching out into things like online marketing, paid marketing, email marketing, all that stuff. So because the companies were so small and I had to wear so many hats, it was really advantageous to be able to get my hands into a lot of different pieces of a company that you wouldn't have if you were just specialized designer on a really big team. So really that experience and being in small environments, doing a lot of different things is what helps me build like a really robust tool belt, if that makes sense. But everything from marketing, designing, building websites, kind of just like forges you into being a Swiss Army knife just because you have to be, right? You have to be able to do a bunch of little things. And I think having the more digital skills that you have and the more generalist knowledge you have about like the online world right now, the more leverage you're going to have for your career and your life down the line. At least with the way the world is going right now, where everything is digital and everything's online, building out that tool belt is particularly important now.
Yeah, you got to get those scalable skills, the digital Swiss Army knife, like you said. I certainly agree with you. This is my first real job, I would say, like a office style job, and being at a smaller place has been absolutely beneficial and incredible to bear witness to the growth that we've had here. So I can certainly understand the benefits and things that you gathered from that. But yeah, it's been excellent to have those tools that you were talking about at use here at BTC Inc. And we have so many interesting things going on both here at BTC Inc. and just in Bitcoin in general. I'm curious what you would say you're most looking forward to in the Bitcoin industry right now.
In the entire industry, right? Not just BTC Inc. Because I look
Yeah,
at BTC Inc. and I see everything that I want to get my hands on. So I could do either.
yeah, you could do. I mean, let's do one of each. What's the most exciting thing in the industry and at BTC Inc.
Okay, so I'll start with BTC Inc. Before I even came on board, I made a deck, presented it to David Bailey, and I wanted to I'm extremely bullish on Carrot. I wanted to integrate Carrot in every piece of marketing or every product that we have. I feel like Carrot should be a part of, because I feel like if we're marketing to Bitcoiners, there's no greater incentive or no greater carrot for them to chase than Sats. So I think it should be like a big part of our process. So that would be my BTC Inc. answer. As far as what I'm looking most forward to in the Bitcoin space as a whole, um, it's hard to pick, but I would say if I had to choose something right now, it's not really well fleshed out, but the idea of um, having a decentralized identity using something like Lightning. So if you're logging into a website with your Facebook profile or log in with Google or log in with whatever, there's so much data tied to your digital footprint when you do something like that, and you're building out more metadata on yourself that all these companies compile. I think having a technology like Lightning, where you can be anonymous and you don't have all these identifiers tied to you, and being able to use that just as a means of logging in or as a means of credentials across the web is a massive step in the opposite direction of where we are right now, where it's all like attention hijacking, figuring out the best way to get advertising in people's faces and basically attention hijack. I think if we start from a decentralized point of view and they don't have all that metadata on us, they don't necessarily know how to advertise. So we'll have different models for businesses and companies online to generate revenue, like a value for value model. So most specifically, just Lightning logins would be that answer, I'd say.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, we've had some fantastic, I think, Twitter Space content recently from Daniel Buckner and Shinobi on decentralized identity, building on top of Bitcoin, et cetera. And I interviewed Daniel Buckner within my first couple of weeks here at the company, and I think that's a really interesting subject. Decentralized identity. Everyone logs into things the moment they get online. Our entire internet experience is created through these accounts that we have for everything, and like you said, all of our metadata and our preferences and everything is attached to these identities that we have several of, that are ultimately, as you said, abused or used by advertisers for attention hijacking. So that's an interesting point of view to see decentralized identity as a potential way to sort of eliminate that attention hijacking. I've never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, I think like fundamentally the Web 2 is kind of a broken model. And I know Web 3 is kind of like a hot buzzword out there these days. Everyone wants to kind of define it to their own accord. But I see Web 3 more so as a transition from like a web of metadata and massive digital footprints of information on people to a more decentralized and anonymous web to where we can do trustless commerce and value exchange.
Yeah, hopefully that reality is closer than further away, and I really think it is as Bitcoin adoption occurs. Basically, we'll see people realize the incentives of a decentralized network and the sort of game theory that plays out, and I think we'll see an acceleration towards decentralized, like you say, a Web3 style existence on the internet. So yeah, I mean, very interesting. But to move on to bullishness and such, Nick, I wanted to ask you about your price prediction for the end of the year. We're getting pretty close here, and also, what would you think the price would be by 2030?
Always get some price talk in there. Always. Okay. 2020 at the end of 2021. I mostly, we had a spaces the other day where we were talking about this with the deep dive crew. What do you like? What are your future thoughts on the future of like cycles as they have existed previously? But
Mm-hmm.
I think I ascribe to like the extended cycles theory for the most part. So I think the top of this cycle doesn't necessarily come at like the end of the year. I think it extends like pretty well into 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I know 100,000 seems like the standard right now for everyone's answer, like, oh, 100K, 100K.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know everyone loves a bullish price call, but I think we could kind of just like grind higher through the end of the year instead. So maybe like 80K near end of the year, 80 to 90, something like that. And then as for like the end of 2030, I mean, I think hyper Bitcoinization comes before that time. So, in that vein, dollar pricing will be irrelevant. So my price call for 2030 is 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin.
Of course, it's always true. And I always think the price predictions at the end of these podcasts are going to be so funny to look back at when hyper Bitcoinization has occurred, and we're sitting here discussing the difference between 80K and 100K by the end of the year. It's a beautiful thing to witness, and I think a fantastic thing to record. But I appreciate the hyper Bitcoinization answer. I think that's what we're all hoping for. It's what we're working for, and it's certainly monetary policy and geopolitics would lend us to believe that that's the course we're headed for. But
Yeah, it seems to be aligning that way, I'd say.
yeah, and things just seem to be happening to where that's the case. But without any less, we have Taco Plebs code for y'all for Miami. Make sure to use that. Get 10% off. We have the Macro 21 code for the deep dive, you technical analysis lovers, and make sure to use that. And thanks for joining us, Nick. It's actually been a really fantastic conversation.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
And be sure to check out the next episode of Taco Plebs, everyone. Thanks for joining us.